We acknowledge that we record this show on the land of the Pyramid people and pay our respects to their elders past and present. G'day everyone, g'day Liz. It's been a while since we've been around. What's been happening, Liz?
Surgery.
Surgery for one of us.
Which is exciting because no more pain.
Yeah. Surgery for one of us, anemia for the other, so good times.
Because everyone needs to know about, our health.
Well, we've been missing for 4 months, so...
Oh, golly goshness, that's a long time.
Yeah. And we did promise this episode before the surgery, but we didn't get to it for various health reasons, so listed. We are going to do what we talked about last time, though, and have Liz run us through some stuff on representation. That means I'm going to be playing games today, and I'm not really in the mood for Minecraft, so I am just going to be leveling some of my olds on the Old Republic while we do that.
So over to me?
Over to you, yeah.
Wow, so this was fun. I got to do some archaeology on my own research and dig into folders that said, thesis, old, from CD. Is this it? No. Folder 1, folder 2, folder 3 in the Is This It folder. Sure, philosophers might do their research by reading and writing, but holy shamoly, can there be a lot of stuff that doesn't make the cut that is part of the process. What we want to talk about today is just a general account of representation. And you could be forgiven for being surprised that such a thing is required and that such thought needs to go into providing an account of representation, because we see things that are representations all the time and interact with them without thinking about it. Like so much of philosophy, once you start thinking about it, it becomes really complicated. So you can go on a fascinating journey with us into the mind of a philosopher.
And what will we find inside there?
So in the crime show, when the person is trying to catch the serial killer and they have this crazy wall with all these news clippings and words and photos, and they're connected by lots of different colours of string and lines. That.
Cool.
And that's probably simplistic because it's actually needs to be three-dimensional across the room.
Oh, cool. I thought you would just say representations, but...
No! Okay, so basically what I'm presenting is the account of non-mental representation that Barbara von Eckardt presents in her 1993 book, What is Cognitive Science? And so following her, she let's start with a couple of examples of representation, or a couple of examples of representations. So let's think about a photograph of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the word tree, and that light on my dashboard that comes on when the car is about to run out of petrol. What I want to say about these things is the most obvious thing about them is that there are actually two things involved, one of which is about the other. So the photograph is about the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the word tree is about trees, and the light on the dashboard is about how much petrol isn't in my tank. So let's introduce some vocabulary so we can keep these two different things straight. The thing that is about something else is called the representational vehicle, or just the vehicle, and the thing which it is about is called the object. Oh my God, Liz, there were too many things in that sentence. Let's go back to our examples. The photo. The photo itself, whether it's on your screen or it's the printed out object, is the representational vehicle. And the representational object is the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
Liz, can I come in there? Just for those who do want to read along at home with the von Eckardt, she'll use a different term in place of representing vehicle. She uses the term representation bearer. Is it worth mentioning as well where her analysis comes from? Because it's not original.
It comes from Charles Sanders Peirce, is it Peirce?
Yeah.
It's got the I first, but like my name, you say E.
Yeah. It looks like you should pronounce it Pierce, but...
Just like it looks like you should pronounce my name Shire.
Yeah.
So this is not new. But it is actually new to a lot of... It was at the time new to a lot of philosophers and perhaps still is.
Yeah. Unless they happen to have specialised in a very particular field of philosophy called...
Semiotics.
Semiotics, yeah.
Okay, so the vocabulary we're going to use is representational vehicle for the thing that is the representation. So if I said to you, find me a representation, what you would be looking for is the representational vehicle. So if we're thinking about the photo, the vehicle is the picture, the image. If we're thinking about the word, the vehicle is the squiggles on the page or the sound I make, tree. And if we're thinking about the petrol light, it is the light on the dashboard. So the first thing we have is the vehicle, and the second thing we have is the object. That's the thing that the vehicle's about. So if we're thinking about the photo of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the object or the representational object is the thing in the world, the bridge. So going back over the terminology so far, we have the representational vehicle, which is the thing that's doing the representation. So that's the photo or the word or the light on the dashboard. And then we have the representational object or just the object, and that is the thing that is being represented. To go back to how I introduced it, representation involves one thing, the vehicle, which is about another, the object. It is this aboutness, or what's called intentional, that is spelt with a T.
Right. I was going to ask which one. Is it an
Because
S or a T?
philosophers are fun, and there's a related concept that's intentional spelt with an S at the end.
In the middle.
In the middle. Well, the second T is replaced, so it's INTENS.
Yeah. Yes. And that's more to do with...
Doesn't matter what it is, what we're using here. When you hear the sound intentional, it's with a T. And that's for those who know. If you don't know, don't worry.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay, so vehicle is about the object. This aboutness is also known as intentionality, or the intentional relation between the vehicle and the object, and that's at the heart of representation. In some sense, what makes the vehicle a representation of an object is the fact that it is about the object. The question then becomes, where does this aboutness come from? How can we explain this aboutness?
You have, as you said, Liz, two distinct objects, and one of them seems to somehow contain the other one in some loose hand-waving sense.
I really don't like that way of talking about it, because I think anything but the loose hand wavy is nonsensical, and I think aboutness is more precise than the loose hand wavy contain. Nevertheless, that is right. That is how some people talk about it.
And your way is definitely better, but you know.
Yeah. So when people say one thing contains the other, they're talking very imprecisely. Welcome again to the mind of a philosopher, where we're talking about this really complex stuff and we can argue for 20 minutes about which word is more appropriate.
For the record, yours is more appropriate, but we just want to throw that other one out there because that's what leads to some people getting confused about how mysterious this is.
Yeah, so I mean, you're seeing how much work has to be done to cut through all the bullshit. Because I'm hoping that despite all of our side conversations, the ultimate picture we're presenting is quite simple. And unfortunately, to get there, there's a lot of historical bullshit that needs to be cut through, or I would say just ignored.
Yeah.
So Glenn I'm talking to the people for whom this is new, and Glenn is talking to the people who already know too much.
And
is that mean?
No. That's quite right. But I just, some people, if they come across these ideas in other places, you get people throwing around terms like the hard problem of content and all this stuff that tries to make it seem like representation is this intrinsically mysterious thing. We just want to be able to acknowledge that is out there, even though the sort of mechanistic stuff that we'll be talking about ultimately is the better way to go. But we don't want people to be misled into thinking that everyone thinks that it
is this way, and we want to acknowledge the existence of the alternatives. Yeah. So I'll present the simple view, and Glenn will link it to the complexities.
Yeah, but also how the sort of mysterians around this sort of stuff just comes from getting these sorts of issues wrong at the start.
Yes, if you don't, you need to have a really good, solid foundation in order to then build on it to an account of even more complicated things. And actually getting the basics right is really damn hard. Because there's been so many misfires.
Yeah.
Okay, so to recap again, we have a representing vehicle, which is about a representing object. We have a photo, which is about the Sydney Harbour Bridge. How can we go about explaining this aboutness relation? How can we go about explaining the intentionality that we see there? What we're asking for when we ask for this is an account of content, and in particular, an account of how content is grounded. So Glenn talked about the content before. We're going to focus in particular on how content is grounded. There is more to content than just grounding, as you will see. So for the moment, we're talking about grounding. And an account of how content is grounded is an account of how the vehicle gets to be about the object. So it's an account of the aboutness. It is not a description of the content of the representation.
Yeah, so it's probably worth saying at this point what the difference between content and object is.
So the difference between content and object, an easy way to grasp it is to think about the point of view of a picture. So sure, the picture is about the Sydney Harbour Bridge, but it is about the Sydney Harbour Bridge from a particular point of view. Is there anything more you wanted to add?
I guess one way to put it, if you want a word for it, is that the content is the object as it is represented, and so this misses out on a lot of stuff. So in the example that you're talking about there, Liz, the aspects of the bridge that are not visible from that point of view, such as its foundations or something like that.
Or just the other side of the bridge.
Yeah.
If you think about the light on the dashboard, it doesn't tell you how much petrol's in the tank. It just tells you that it's gone below the level
the cutoff,
of the sensor. And so I'm old enough to have driven cars where when you go round a corner and the petrol sloshes in the tank, it'll cover the sensor up, and so magically when you're going around corners, you're not running out of petrol, and then when you go straight, you are.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a difference between the content, which is probably ultimately the sensor's not covered by the liquid,
Yep.
and the object, which is the state of the tank.
Yep.
So how does the content get grounded? How does the vehicle get to be about the object? What is it about the photo that makes it about the bridge, or the word that makes it about trees, or the light that makes it about how much petrol's in my tank? What we're asking for here is, as I said, a theory of content grounding, or a theory of content determination. There are 3 general accounts of content determination: resemblance, convention, and causation. Each of these accounts provide a different explanation of the means by which a representation or vehicle gets to be about an object. You can tell what the nature of the relation is from their names. So according to a resemblance account of content, the vehicle is about the object because it resembles the object. A causal account says that the vehicle is about the object because it is caused by the object. And a conventional account sees the ground of content to be the existence of a convention to use the vehicle as a representation of the object. Now might be a good time to pause and think about the 3 examples we've been working with and which one might have its content grounded in resemblance, which has it grounded in causation, and which has it grounded in convention. So, the photo is an example of resemblance representation. What makes it a photo of the Sydney Harbour Bridge rather than the Sydney Opera House is the fact that it looks like the bridge and not the Opera House. What do we mean when we say looks like? This gets really tortured, but the pattern of light that it was called...
Yeah.
Hey, let me read literally what I've got written and we'll see how that goes.
I think looks like is intuitive enough for this point. Might be worth just saying that each of these has a name on von Eckardt's scheme as well. And
which is what?
So these are icons, just because that's going to be relevant to what I'm talking about next time.
If someone showed me a picture of the bridge and told me it was a picture of the Opera House, I would know they had made a mistake, because the picture does not look like the Opera House. The photo is an icon, is a picture of the bridge, because it preserves some of the spatial aspects of the bridge. If it's a photo of the bridge taken from side on, you'll see 2 distinct arcs being transected by a horizontal line just above the bottom of the upper arc, with a series of vertical lines running from the outside arc through the inside arc to the horizontal line. You could Google Sydney Harbour Bridge and click on image, and I almost guarantee that the first one you see will be of the type I just described. Photos and drawings in general are the most simple to understand examples of icons, of representations which represent by resemblance. But there's lots of other examples. A paint chip represents the colour of the paint because it resembles the colour of the paint. And a map represents by preserving some of the spatial relations between the things that are being mapped. We'll see that there are actually a different number of ways of developing this basic idea. But if we say icon or resemblance forms of representation, you won't go wrong by thinking of a picture. At the other end of the spectrum, we have words. Words are an example of representations that have their content grounded in convention. What makes the word tree about trees is, in some sense, that English speakers agree to use it to refer to trees. It's just a matter of convention, that string of letters or that sound refers to a woody perennial plant having a single, usually elongate main stem, generally with few or no branches on its lower part. That is the definition that the dictionary gave me. We can appreciate that it's just a matter of convention by realizing that we can change the convention, and in changing the convention, we can change the meaning. We could agree to use the word tree to refer to windows. Let's agree to that right now. Now the word tree means window. For those not privy to this convention, our talk of getting new curtains for the tree in the kitchen might seem bizarre. But now that you're in on our secret, you know what I mean. And if we informed the bemused onlooker of our convention, they would then be able to understand our conversation as well. The point is, there is nothing about the word tree in and of itself that means it must be about trees. It's just that that's what English speakers use. The picture, in contrast, is different. Like I said before, if you showed me a picture of the Sydney Harbour Bridge and said it was a picture of the Opera House, I knew you would be wrong. Now, we could set up a convention that says that if I sent you a picture of the bridge, you should meet me at the Opera House. And if I sent you a picture of the Opera House, you should meet me at the bridge. So we can set up a convention about an icon that is in tension with what the icon resembles. But it doesn't change the fact that the icon resembles what it resembles. In contrast, all there is to the word tree is the convention. Some of you following along at home might be thinking now of onomatopoeic words. That is, words that sound like the thing they represent. They are a subset of words precisely because of that resemblance. Okay, we've talked about the picture, which is an icon because it has its content grounded in resemblance. We've talked about the word, which is a symbol in von Eckart's terminology because it has its content grounded in convention. We've talked about how an icon can be used conventionally. So when we are using the picture of the bridge to mean meet at the Opera House, we are turning something that is an icon into a symbol because it has its content now grounded in the convention. The message it's sending is due to the convention and not only its resemblance. You can see how things begin to get so messy because we can use the one representational vehicle in lots of many different ways. And depending on how we're using it, we will be making use of different grounding relations. And then if you think about onomatopoeic words, there's both symbols, but also when spoken, sound like the sound they're about. So it's a symbol, but also in some ways an icon, at least when spoken out loud. So, what about the light? Well, the only form of content grounding relation we haven't talked about is causation. So, as we've foreshadowed what makes the light, about the fact that the petrol tank is empty is that the light is caused to come on by the sensor not being covered by petrol. When we go around the corner, the light goes off because the petrol sloshes over the sensor again. Now you'll understand why I purposefully said light and not the picture of the petrol tank. So I'm imagining an old car where it's just a light that comes on. Many cars now have a picture that is an icon of a petrol tank. We can see, if it's just a light, that if I went and fiddled with the wiring and made the light now come on when the radiator's empty, so I crossed the wires and now the petrol tank light is connected to the radiator and the radiator light is connected to the petrol tank sensor. If they're just lights, then it seems natural to say that when I change the wiring, the light's now about the emptiness of the radiator, because it's caused to come on when the radiator is empty. Its function is to now detect the emptiness of the radiator, not the petrol tank, because it has a causal relation to that. The light need not resemble an empty petrol tank in any way, nor does the light get its content by convention. Unlike the word tree, we could not successfully agree to use the light to signal that the radiator is empty until we've crossed the wires. The light is related to the state of the petrol tank independently of any convention we may have set up concerning it, because it's caused to come on when the petrol tank is empty. So, there are 3 ways in which a representing vehicle can be related to a represented object. That means that the vehicle is about the object. There's 3 different ways to explain this aboutness relation. Resemblance, which gives you icons. Convention, which gives you symbols. And causation, which gives you
indexes. Or indices is probably the...
Indices, yeah.
Index for the single and indices for the plural.
Okay, I'm going to continue to not use those words unless I remember, so Glenn, please feel free to interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I hopefully foreshadowed at the beginning that what we're looking at here is a triadic account of representation. So far, I have only given you 2 things. So far, content grounding is a dyadic relationship. Why do we need to add something else to what is already incredibly complex? Well, Glenn's hinted at it already. It's because it turns out that all representing vehicles which have a content grounding relation to a represented object aren't by themselves representations. They also need to be interpreted. And for non-mental representations, that is just that we need to use them as representations. So when I'm pulling up a picture of the Sydney Harbour Bridge to show you what it looks like, I'm using it to represent the bridge in virtue of its resemblance. When I send Glenn a message of the Sydney Harbour Bridge to tell him to meet me at the Opera House, I'm not only making use of the fact that it resembles the bridge, I'm also making use of the fact that we have set up a convention about what the icon means. So in this case, the icon doesn't mean go to the bridge, it means go to the Opera House. The easiest way, probably, to see that we need to interpret vehicles is to think about causation as a ground of content. Causation is everywhere, and representation isn't.
So you can say the same thing about resemblance, because
resemblance is everywhere, and so that's one of the common criticisms you'll see of resemblance is that resemblance is everywhere, but representation isn't. And I think the point is that that is true for any of the existing accounts of content determination.
Yeah. So a picture of the Harbour Bridge sort of resembles to some degree a lot of other bridges.
Yes.
It also resembles to a lesser degree different kinds of buildings.
Yes.
The picture of the Harbour Bridge also resembles to some extent an electron.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they both share the property of existing.
That is the sigh one makes when somebody is being a dick in service of a very good philosophical point.
But the point is, that's not going to be sufficient for representation any more than causation is. Because there are plenty of causal relationships out there. I'm engaging in many now, which don't represent me. So if I'm moving the mouse on the screen, and that's a causal effect that I'm producing, but it doesn't represent me unless someone chooses to use it to represent.
Is Glenn in front of the computer? Oh, well, all I can see is the screen. The mouse is moving, so yes. Or here's a silly one another causal example. An example of how you can use a causal relation to get information about something, to represent something. So the bizarre example I managed to come up with is I can use the presence of grass in our backyard to represent that we've had rain. We live in Adelaide. Adelaide's classified roughly as a Mediterranean climate. It often is very dry, and so often in the summer there is no grass in our backyard. Then it rains in autumn, and now there's grass in the backyard. So I can use the fact that there's the grass in the backyard to know that it has been raining. Let's say I've been away for months, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if we had a wet autumn or we had a dry autumn. Oh, the backyard's really green and it needs a mow. We had a wet autumn.
But just the point is that the grass doesn't represent the amount of rain we had over autumn until you use it to do so.
Yes. And so my favourite example of resemblance is me and my sister Natalie. This was probably more true in the past than now. So 20 years ago, my sister and I clearly had a family resemblance. Age and weight fluctuations have taken their toll, so it's less obvious. But it's definitely the case that I resemble my sister Natalie. But am I actually a representation of her? Well, I could be. Say there's a room full of people and I say to you, oh, Natalie's the one who looks like me. But you won't be able to find my sister Lou because we don't look so much like each other. If I tell you that, then I'm making use of the resemblance between myself and my sister in order for you to find Natalie. Or perhaps I could say, oh, I'm wondering which haircut I want. Do I want a haircut like my sister Lou or a haircut like my sister Natalie? Well, that the haircut suits Nat is a good indication that it's also going to suit me, but that the haircut suits Lou isn't really useful for me because our faces are different. We don't look like each other. But the point is that as with the causally grounded representations, it's not until the vehicle, my sister, has been used to stand in for me in virtue of the fact that we resemble each other that we can say that we have a representation. So it's not just that somebody uses it, but somebody uses it in virtue of that grounding relation. So sure, that there being grass is caused by rain, and it's because it's caused by rain that I can find out how much rain there is. I could, let's say somebody snuck in and poisoned our grass, or Glenn decided to poison the grass while I was overseas. I might mistakenly think that we have had a dry autumn because there's no grass, but it turns out no, Glenn is about to pave it, and so he wanted to kill the grass.
I would kill the grass if I was allowed.
Glenn would kill the grass if it wasn't our dog's toilet. The point being, it's able to serve its representational function because I'm using the grounding relation. And if I'm wrong about what caused it, then I'm misrepresenting what happened. The need to interpret or the need to use it as a representation is most obvious for conventionally grounded representations, is most obvious for symbols, precisely because the relationship between the vehicle and the object is entirely arbitrary. It doesn't matter if it resembles, it doesn't matter if it's caused by. All that matters is that we agree to use it in that way. There's no objective relation between the vehicle and the object for representations that have their content grounded in convention, which is why it's so much easier to simply switch the convention and switch the meaning for words. Because the word has no objective use-independent relation to woody perennial plants, we can change the convention and change the word. That's what happens when you learn another language. You learn another set of conventions. That convention gives, or use gives a symbol its meaning, is quite well understood what's underappreciated is that although there is another content grounding relation, use is equally important for icons and indices. This making use of is what's called interpretation. So, for non-mental representation, interpretation involves a mind, a subject, making use of the relation between the vehicle and the object to use the vehicle to stand in for the object. Von Eckardt suggests that the role of interpretation is to mediate between the subject and the object such that the object of the representation can make a difference to what's going on in the subject's head. For example, to be able to use the light on my dashboard as a representation of the emptiness of the petrol tank, I need to understand that it's caused by the empty petrol tank. If I have no understanding of the relation between the light and the petrol tank, I might wonder what that light is for and why it only comes on just before I run out of petrol. I had an experience very much like this with our second-hand Fiat 500. It's got a light that comes on to indicate that the tyre pressure is below a certain level. But what it looks like is a wheel on a bumpy road. So I thought it was telling me something about the grip of the car. And I had no frickin' idea why this light was coming on and what it was representing. It's only when I looked it up in the book to be told that it's been caused by the tyres being below a certain level of pressure that I knew what it was about. Glenn, did that work?
Yeah, so that image is meant to be a picture of a flat tyre, is it?
I think so, yeah.
So this does then get important with the degree. We won't get to this today, but the degree of resemblance. And as resemblance goes down, things become less iconic and more symbolic.
Yeah. Or perhaps more indexical. Where are we at? Saying that non-mental representation is triadic is saying that representation involves not only a vehicle, which is related by some grounding relation to an object, but it also requires a subject who is able to understand the relation between the vehicle and the object in order to use the vehicle to stand in for the object. On a triadic account of non-mental representation, there is no representation until the vehicle has been interpreted, until the vehicle has been used to stand in for the object. The reason I am driving this point home so much is that while it's well understood that symbolic representations need interpretation, that you only have a symbol when you use it, it's less well understood that the same is true for icons and indices, that the same is true for things that represent via resemblance or via causation. So a triadic account, you need three things. Or if you're familiar with discussions and debates about representation, it might be useful to think of a triadic account as saying all non-mental representations work like symbols, in that all of them need to be used before you have a representation. That's all I have to say, Glenn.
Excellent. So that's, I think, all we have to talk about today. I think it's worth foreshadowing a couple of places that we're going with this in terms of mental representations and the importance that they play for theories of consciousness and the different kinds of representations that matter for different theories. And the reason why different kinds are going to matter is because how they can enter into processes where the content matters is going to be different.
So for those of you who have jumped backwards from stuff we are intending to produce, an interesting distinction will be digital versus analog forms of representation. In case it's already occurred to you that if we take this account of non-mental representation to be an account of mental representation, you get a regress. That's next week, next time.
Next 101.
Next 101 will be about how what we have said for non-mental representation needs tweaking to work for mental representation so that you avoid a regress.
Cool. Shall we call it a day?
We'll definitely call it a day, and that's what the dog wants too.
All right. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, everyone. Yep.
You can cut that out too, Glenn. I'm not attached to that. I stand by the side.